Hello everyone and welcome to what is part 2 of my review series covering Game of Thrones. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently watching Game of Thrones for the first time and I'll be sharing my opinion on each individual season. In this video I'll be covering Season 2 and as expected I won't be holding back on any spoilers, so please do keep that in mind. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to start this video just by letting you know that it hasn't been an easy video for me to make. I began this video series with the good intentions of trying to get through roughly one season of the show per week and then making a review about it shortly after. However, due to The Walking Dead returning to our screens and with it surprisingly not being shit, my Walking Dead content took priority over this new Game of Thrones project, which meant it just kind of got put on hold. Also, when I was watching Season 2, I was in the middle of getting ready to move house and I had a lot of stuff going on, so it was a bit difficult to get through it as quickly as I would have liked. I'd say it's been about a month now since I watched the season finale, and even though I did take a ton of notes when I was watching Season 2, there's obviously going to be stuff that I'd forgotten about, as this season isn't as fresh in my mind compared to when I did a review of Season 1, which was made more or less immediately after I finished it. So basically, if this review is a bit disjointed and I forget to mention certain things, I apologise. I guess I could just watch through the entire season again, but with me having 5 more seasons to get through before the show resumes in April, I don't really want to do that. So anyway, Game of Thrones' second season is a bit of a strange beast. On one hand, it fantastically ups the ante from its debut season by introducing more characters, expanding the storyline, and showing viewers more of the varied locations from its grandiose universe. Whilst on the other hand, I was disappointed to see some of my favourite characters pushed to the sidelines in favour of new cast members, and I can't say it managed to change my opinion regarding certain characters that I didn't care for in Season 1. Daenerys. Now, despite the fact that I have a YouTube channel which mainly revolves around me reviewing one TV show, the truth is, aside from The Walking Dead, I don't really watch an awful lot of TV. And that's mainly because I'm a bit weird and that I don't like sitting still for very long without actually doing anything. You know that annoying kid at school who's always moving in their chair, constantly fidgeting like they just had some kind of cocaine breakfast? Well, that's me, and I'm not ashamed to admit that my knowledge of TV is quite limited, which is why I'm now trying to branch out into other shows. I think because I've only really mainly watched shows in the past that have been based on comic books, I've usually found them to have relatively simple narrative structures, which usually just boils down to introducing a new villain each season and then having the protagonist overcome that villain. So after Ned was killed in Season 1 with Joffrey being set up as the big bad, I naively thought that the focus of this season would pretty much all be about Robb Stark versus Joffrey. However, that's not really the case, as so many new characters come into play with other rivalries forming, meaning this season is so much more than just Joffrey versus Robb, and I really like that. If this were a Marvel TV show, for example, which I enjoy most of their TV shows, so I'm not trying to shit on Marvel here, Joffrey would have been defeated at the end of Season 2, with Season 3 focusing on another villain, who would have then probably been defeated at the end of that season, and well, you get the idea. So the rather long-winded point that I'm trying to make here is that I like the fact that Game of Thrones didn't opt for the simple villain of the week structure of its second season. Instead, it continued to build on the already huge tangled web of families all trying to backstab one another for their own personal gain. I'm going to spend the majority of this review talking about specific characters rather than the overarching plot, because like I said in the last video, if you're watching this, then it's highly likely you've already watched Game of Thrones already, so I don't see the point of explaining every single plot point to you. So as I've just mentioned Joffrey, I think I'll talk about him first. Now, you might remember I said during my first review that I was looking forward to seeing how far Joffrey would push it in terms of being a villain. Well, after the Season 2 premiere, I immediately regretted saying that. I mean, the guy orders people to kill children and babies. I mean, a baby gets stabbed, what the hell? Thankfully, we are spared from physically seeing the poor baby killed in front of us, however the scene in which the deed plays out is still pretty disturbing, and is a moment I'm sure that will stay with me for a long time. Although Joffrey doesn't do anything else as abhorrent during the course of the season, there are a few other notable scenes that display his clear penchant for sadism. When Tyrion sends some prostitutes to him in the hope that maybe if he has sex it will clear some of his teenage angst, Joffrey, instead of getting it on with the ladies, chooses to watch the girls beat each other. And I mean he actually watches them beat the crap out of each other with a bedpole, or whilst aiming a crossbow at them so they do as he asks. For the record, I don't think he really got any kind of sexual gratification out of this because we don't see any evidence of that. In fact, from what I've seen on the show, I don't really think Joffrey is interested in sex at all. Instead, I just think he enjoys watching people suffer. There's another scene which springs to mind in which again Joffrey is holding a crossbow, this time to Sansa's head, as he asks her about her brother's treason. Now, as Tyrion says, there's no way in hell Sansa would know anything about Robb's plans as she hasn't been in contact with him for quite some time, and surely deep down Joffrey must know that as well, but he's just a sociopath who gets a kick out of punishing people. Even with all this in mind, strangely by the end of the season, I kind of felt a bit sorry for Joffrey, despite the fact that he is a complete and utter prick, and the show does deserve some credit for that. I don't think we can really excuse Joffrey's behaviour, however when you have a witch of a mum like Cersei, you haven't really got much chance of being raised as a decent human being. When you look at the Stark kids, there's no denying that they had a privileged life compared to the common folk. However, Ned taught his kids the meaning of respect, and Joffrey on the other hand has been allowed to run right his entire life, and it's not really a surprise he's turned out the way he has. As the season progresses, I feel that Joffrey somewhat loses his fear factor, as both the characters around him and the audience realise that he isn't actually this scary, intimidating person, rather he's just a dumb kid who has access to a ton of resources and hasn't been given any rules or boundaries in respect to what he can do with them. For example, at the end of season 1, I don't think the commoners would have dared to revolt against him after seeing him kill Ned. However, halfway through season 2, the people have had enough of being treated like shit by their king, with them inciting a full-blown riot on the streets. Secondly, towards the end of the season, when Stannis arrives on Joffrey's doorstep, Joffrey initially decides to join his soldiers on the battlefield. However, after realising the reality of the situation he's got himself in for, he decides to leave. His indecision regarding whether to fight or flee made me realise that Joffrey isn't a king at all, but instead it's just a kid playing the role of a king who found himself in way too deep. I like the fact that his vulnerabilities were displayed as the narrative progressed. Had he just spent the entire 10 episodes as this purely evil character who everyone feared, it might have gotten a bit stale, so I really enjoyed seeing everyone growing tired of his bullshit. And I do wonder how he will attempt to rule over his people in season 3 when it seems that majority don't even have an ounce of respect left for him anymore. Alongside Joffrey, Theon Greyjoy emerges as another antagonist in a move that surprised me. Although admittedly I couldn't remember what he was called during season 1, look, there are a lot of characters in Game of Thrones, don't judge me, I liked him, so you best bet I was pissed to see him turning against the family who raised him. However, like Joffrey, the more time I spent with Theon, the more I began to sympathise with him. Theon finds himself in season 2 kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Part of him wants to help the Starks, but he feels like the black sheep within the family as he isn't blood. On the other hand, he also wants to help please his biological dad, but the guy is a bit of a dick, he didn't raise him, and he doesn't really seem to give a shit about him. Ultimately, whether he sides with the Starks or the Greyjoys, he's going to end up with one family who hates him, and Theon decides to go and please the Greyjoys instead of sticking with the family he grew up with, which personally I don't agree with, but I can understand his decision. This story arc made me think about adopted children who go out and seek their biological families. Okay, most of them don't go around killing people when doing so, but just hear me out. In a situation where a foster child seeks out their biological parents, it can sometimes create a lot of problems for the adoptee. For example, they might feel like they are disappointing their foster parents by searching for someone who hasn't raised them, with the foster parents also being worried about potentially being replaced. On the other hand, if the child is denied the right to seek out their biological parents, they may feel resentment, especially if they are made to feel that they were never part of the adoptive family anyway. And this is why, despite me feeling that Theon was a traitor when he first sided with the rest of the Greyjoys, I kind of started to open up to him by season 2's conclusion. I especially like the scene when he found himself talking to the Maester in Winterfell about the mess of the situation he managed to stir up, and part of me really hoped he would actually run off to join the Night's Watch just so he wouldn't be killed. He's a character I'm really looking forward to seeing again in season 3. I guess the only other real villain this season is Stannis. Well, I don't know if you would consider him a villain because he does try and kill Joffrey, but the guy does kill his own brother with some weird demon child thing, so I consider him to be one of the bad guys. I know that Game of Thrones is renowned for its shocking deaths, but I was kind of pissed to see Renly die because I was really starting to like him. I have to say I think Stannis is by far one of the weakest new characters who were introduced, just because I find him to be so very dull. Once the short-lived conflict between him and his brother Renly was over, I didn't really care what he got up to, which kind of put a dampener on the epic final battle that took place between him and Joffrey, because it was kind of weird watching a battle play out but knowing that you didn't really care if either of them died. It felt a bit odd watching a fight play out and not wanting either side to win. I suppose most will argue that I should have been cheering on Stannis because what Joffrey did to Ned, but Stannis killed his own brother, he's a bastard as well. If he takes the throne, he's probably just going to be as bad a king as Joffrey. So regardless of the outcome, things are going to be a bit shit really. Just like Brexit. Anyway, speaking of new characters, another guy who I didn't really get at all was this dude, who I think is called Yakin or Jackin, I'm not entirely sure. So this guy's gimmick is that he kills people once you give him a name, with him acting as Arya's get out of jail card on many occasions, and well, I just thought it was a bit dumb really. And all a bit of a too convenient method for Arya to get out of trouble. I mean, there's a moment in which Arya gives him his own name as the person to kill because he's not helping her, and the dude starts losing it.
Unname me now, you can't name me. Please unname me, Arya, unname me.
What is this? What is happening here? The guy's having a panic attack because Arya said his name. I just can't take it seriously, I'm sorry. And perhaps that might be one of the reasons why I feel as though I prefer the first season, because as I said in my previous review, I'm not really big on magic and the other standard standard fantasy tropes which do feature a lot more in this season. You've got Arya's magic shape-shifting assassin friend, Stannis and the witch's demon love child, the dude from the Crystal Maze who can clone himself somehow, and I can't really say that I cared for any of it. I accept that I can't really use this as a criticism because this is just a personal gripe of mine. I mean, what can I say? I've just never really been into this kind of fiction that contains magic and the supernatural, and despite how good Game of Thrones is, it still can't make these things appeal to me. Speaking of things that don't appeal to me, let's just talk about Daenerys. Oh, Daenerys. I just don't get her character at all. She keeps on saying that the throne should be hers and that she's going to take it back, but I still haven't been presented with any reasons why I should care, or why I should want her to take the Iron Throne. I might get a lot of shit for this, but based on what I've seen of her during the first 2 seasons, I think people just like her because she has dragons, because I can't really see anything else appealing about her character. Her time in Cath was by far the worst aspect of this season for me, and just like in season 1, every time the show switched focus to her, I couldn't wait for it to go back to someone else. I'm aware Daenerys is in the show for the long haul, so I really hope I start liking her soon, otherwise I might just go for a nap whenever she appears on screen. Anyway, enough negativity for a moment, I want to talk about some of the characters who I did enjoy this season. Once again, I found myself enamoured with Tyrion. I have no idea if I used that word correctly or not. Let's just have a quick look here, enamoured. Smitten or in love with?
Oh, Tyrion, baby, kiss me. Oh, Tyrion, I love you.
Okay then, so what did I enjoy about his character in particular this season? Well, once again, Tyrion shines as the nobleman he is, who unfortunately has found himself born into a pretty shitty family. A bit like me then. That was a joke, Mum. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Tyrion manages to both demonstrate his brains and his brawn this season to great effect. At first, when I saw him feeding different rumours to Littlefinger, the eunuch, and this old perv whose name escapes me, I didn't really know what he was doing. However, when I found out it was all just an exercise to see who he could trust, I just wanted to stand up and applaud the guy. He never fails to impress me with his intelligence, and it also helps that he's as witty and as sharp as they come. Perhaps the thing that surprised me the most about his character was that once again he took to the battlefield and became the de facto leader in Joffrey's absence. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have really been too shocked by this as he did partake in battle during season 1, but still you've got to give a character of his stature credit for putting his life on the line. I'm looking forward to seeing how he recovers from pretty much losing all his men and being demoted, but with Tyrion being Tyrion, I'm sure he will find a way. Next up I want to talk about Jon Snow, who I felt was a bit hit and miss this time around. I still like Jon, I mean, how can you not like him? However, I didn't think that the time he spent out behind the wall was all that interesting. In fact, this is quite bad of me to admit, but at one point I even forgot exactly what he was doing outside the wall. I feel as though we saw less of him this season when compared to last, and I'm hoping that as he has now reached the home of Man Raper, things will get more interesting for him. Wait, Man Raper? Man Raper? That really can't be right. Surely his name isn't Man Raper. God, I just said I hope things will get interesting for him. Well, they certainly will if he's going to see Man Raper. Bloody hell. Right, let me try and find this out. Oh, Mance Raider, not Man Raper, Mance Raider. And the first result on Google says that Mance Raider was a member of the Night's Watch, and it has him listed as being in the show from season 3 to 5, which means that I know he's going to die now, and this is why you don't Google any Game of Thrones characters when you haven't caught up with the show. So yeah, back to Jon Snow. For me, I didn't really think he was given an awful lot to do this season, and that was until he decided to do an impression of Pepe, no, not the weird frog meme, the footballer, as he slide tackled the red-headed wildling in a move that surely would have seen him banned for 3 matches.
And the wildling's gonna clear here, and then Jon Snow comes out of nowhere with a crashing tackle. Surely that's a straight red. Absolutely disgusting.
For the record, I am glad that he spared the girl because I don't subscribe to the view that all the wildlings are these evil creatures who need to be killed, and I think Jon and Sam are slowly realising that that's not the case as well. Jon and the girl, again, sorry I'm bad with names, but I'm not googling anything Game of Thrones related again, have real chemistry. Her playful teasing of him was pretty funny to watch, and it's no surprise that the two are a couple in real life. Hopefully Jon and she will play a bigger role in episodes to come. Now before I wrap up, there's a few other characters that I want to mention. First off, I still find Bran to be incredibly boring, and I'm getting sick of him and his dreams about bloody crows. To be honest, I don't really care what happens to him, and it's a shame that he wasn't actually killed by Theon. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh, but still his character just seems kind of pointless to me. I also felt like Arya, who is one of my favourite characters, suffered the same problem as Jon did in that she wasn't given an awful lot to do. The poor girl had to spend most of her time in jail, which did make sense from a narrative point of view, but I just wanted to see Arya be free doing stuff because she's such a cool character. Admittedly, I did like the time that she spent with Tywin, with the scene when Littlefinger arrived being particularly suspenseful due to him knowing who Arya was. And also I found myself pretty shocked by just how much I liked Tywin. As the father of the brat Cersei and the grandfather to Joffrey, I wasn't sure what he would be like, but he actually seems like a half-decent guy, if you can say he's a half-decent guy when he goes around starting wars, but still. It seems okay to me. When he stops the jailers killing the prisoners, you get a sense that maybe a lot of the heinous acts his soldiers are carrying out might not actually come directly from his command. And that's about all I really want to talk about. I know there's loads of other characters that I haven't covered as well as plot points, but like I said at the start of this review, this season isn't as fresh in my mind as it perhaps should be, so there's certain things that I may have forgotten, and I also don't want this video to be an hour long. So sorry if you're waiting to hear my thoughts on the likes of Brienne and Jaime, but I just don't really have much to say to them at this point in time. I'm not sure whether this video comes off as overly negative or not, but I think it's important to point out that I don't dislike this season, not by a long shot. In fact, I found it to be a very good 10 episodes of television. However, when sitting through it, I just couldn't shake the feeling that maybe there was something I was missing. Again, this may be down to the circumstances that surrounded me when I was watching Season 2, as I mentioned earlier. However, I think I prefer Season 1 to its follow-up. There's a conversation that takes place towards the end of the season between Tyrion and someone else, I'm not entirely sure who, but basically the gist of the conversation is that someone says to Tyrion, or it might be the other way around, just bear with me here, that Daenerys is alive and has dragons, and then one of them says words to the effect of, don't worry about that, we'll deal with that later. And for me, that conversation really just about summed up this season. Season 2 is great, but a lot of its plot feels like set up for what is to come later down the line. Granted, it's probably necessary setup, but when the last episode ended, it kind of felt to me like I'd watch a mid-season finale rather than a season finale. Maybe one day I'll end up feeling the same way about this season as I do The Walking Dead second season, and that eventually I'll look back on it more favourably after I watch the rest of the show, but for now I think it's very good, but not incredible. So there you go, that's the end of the review. Please let me know your thoughts below. Did you enjoy this season? Did you not particularly care for it? Have you even watched this season? Did you like the video? Just let me know, whatever you think. I don't really have a lot else to say at this time because I'm absolutely knackered, so I need to go to bed, but in the next video I'll probably give you more of an update and talk a bit more at the end. But for now anyway, I just want to go to bed. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.